the play deals with the one time that I got a date with her, but it turned out to be a date with her and her posse.
And that's some of the funniest stuff in the play. Um, I wanted to speak about some of the use of the Greek chorus, just to give the readers and listeners a taste of that. Here's one of them. Because we are accessories, Daniel Wagner, and his vagaries play out before your eyes and ears as some sweet karmic song of years. And Danny Wagner doesn't seem to particularly enjoy the use of the Greek chorus. He often cuts them off and stops them. He's sort of unsure of whether it's really needed in it. Was that your intention, or did that sort of just come as you were writing the play?
Yeah, Jessica just walked in, but no, yeah, I wanted to use a Greek chorus. Every so often, I try to use different elements that are germane to a particular form. When I wrote that science fiction novel, I used a lot of tropes that are familiar from other science fiction fictions, whether they're books or films or whatnot. And so I thought, well, let me go back to the beginning of theater and use the Greek chorus in a kind of way, but they only get maybe 3 or 4 singing things. Danny, as you said, cuts them off more often than not, but they are sort of a reflection, and they're played by the same actors that end up being the gay posse of Karissa Drake. And so, it's just a way to sort of acknowledge the affinity, because this play was written right around the time that I wrote, like, The Still Standing Domino. So both of those plays, for example, have these sort of, I guess, quasi-scientific ideas about, can a domino in a row just suddenly not fall as it should fall, and the Drake equation is, some people think it's a sort of pseudoscientific equation that you could never really get a good estimate there. But anyway, that was the gist.
I would agree with that assessment. I think it's impossible to concoct an equation based on the observable universe when there's so much that's unobserved. Um, I did find one line throughout the play that I think it epitomizes not just this play, but most of your drama and really all of your corpus. I was never to them what they were to me, in the sense that what Danny brings to these characters and how he feeds off of it is something they're not really capable of, and it shows how different he is than most of the characters in his plays.
Well, yeah, if you look at now, I've written 55 total plays, and probably 2/3 to maybe 70% of them deal with Danny's sexual misadventures. Danny does, score with some of the girls. He strikes out with more girls. The whole Big Four, the first 3 plays of the Big Four, is Danny striking out with this girl or that girl. And yeah, they never, I tend to always look at the brighter side, or try to think the best of people, which is something that Jessica, my wife, is the exact opposite. The minute she finds some flaw in someone, it's always that, 2 minutes of conversation with someone and Jessica has them branded for life. Whereas I always probably go to the other end and try to, give people the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't often work out that way, but, this is another case where she just really wasn't into me. I mean,
Hence why she brought her gay friends. And speak about those scenes. They're some of the funniest in the play. You do mention the Drake equation again throughout this. You mentioned it earlier in the play, and again you were explaining it to all these gay characters who actually seem to take more interest in you than Karissa does.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it's been now 3 or 4 months since I wrote this play. So I don't remember all the exact scenes, but I do remember the real life version, which is now almost 30 years gone. This was 1991, and I met Karissa. We had talked on the phone in between these Adoptee Liberty Movement Association meetings, and this is something that often happens. I would meet a girl, I'd get her phone number, we talk or whatnot, and I thought, I would think, naively that things were going great. but the girls generally were just sort of either using me as the dumb guy who is going to be the guy who's going to listen to all their problems, but they don't really want anything to do with sexually. And probably Karissa fell in that category. I can't honestly say that. I mean, she wasn't nasty or anything like that. She's one of these ones that just came in, and after this date, I mean, I remember it was on a Sunday morning, and I met her around 8 o'clock at this little restaurant. I don't think it was by Central Park. I think it was opposite a smaller park in Manhattan. And I went there, I met her, and then in walked these. It was between 5 and 8. I think I have 7 guys in the actual thing, but I don't remember their real names. I remember they were reminding me of the old Village People. That this was a disco group from the '70s with gay guys who, one was dressed as a construction worker, the other as an Indian chief, the other as something else. But they all had these kind of flamboyant personalities. Like one was Hispanic, 2 or 3 were black. Some of them were very effeminate, queer. Others were more macho kind of guys, but they were all gay from what they told me or spoke. And in the 4 or so hours that we just ate and sat there, maybe by 5 hours, I got to know some of them a bit more than she did, and they seemed to like me. They thought I was cool. I think they probably, if they had their way, they would have had Karissa dating me, because apparently, like many exceedingly beautiful women, she would go for the airhead equivalent. I mean, not that she was an airhead. I mean, she had some talent and what. And from what I looked in writing these plays, what I often do is I'll Google the people and find out what they are, and sometimes I'll use their futures of what happens to them in the play. Now she's, I guess, a photographer, who has her own little studio, but it's the typical kind of, she does graduation photos and wedding and bar mitzvahs and this kind of thing. So all of her, I guess you'd call it, all of her deeper aspirations as a music songwriter flew out the windows. But I mean, she was someone who had some talent. I talked about one of her roommates being a musician.
I think that she's a nicer version of the character that you later created in How Much Room for Memory, the Kathy Bertoli character.
Yeah.
In the sense that she doesn't seem as shallow and somewhat nasty as that character, but she does seem just to try to push you off to the side as without really letting you know. At least that character in that play is straight up with you in saying that she wants no interest in a relationship.